This is a D6 generation pip. One of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a pip. A short pip. Little something. About anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today. Hello, welcome to another Pip. My name's Russ. This is, of course, the D6 generation. Today I thought we'd do a little special segment called Co-Vid games. Co-Vid games. Co-Vid games. What I'm going for here is Co-Vid video games. Yeah, that's the kind of wordplay I get away with when Craig is not here. Craig is again off doing Craig-like things. But I really wanted to share with you some of the video games I've been playing. Since he's not here, I get to talk about video games again. Longtime listeners will know that I have to sneak these segments in when Craig isn't paying attention. So I have been playing sort of three epic, meaning longish form video games. Video games, in my mind, like an epic or really long video game is anything in the 30 to 40 hours or more category. Those are kind of like the long games. Sort of the shooter AAA titles like a Halo or Gears of War or something like that's usually, or Call of Duty. The single player is kind of like 10 or 12 hours maybe. So I'm thinking more like the long form games. And since COVID hit back in March, I had a lot of time to sort of try out some of these games, since I was saving time on commute and in the beginning there, work was very fuzzy, things like that. So first of all, the first game I played, I actually played three big games, and I've solved two. I'm in the middle of the third. One was Divinity 2, Original Sin. Played through all of that, and that was a long one. That's like over 100 hours of gameplay there. Then I played Final Fantasy VII, the remake on the PS4, and now I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I don't think that's right. Tsushima? Anyway, really amazing samurai game, so I'll talk more about that in a minute too. But first, Divinity 2, Original Sin. I think I probably mentioned this in the show before because I actually started playing it with my daughters a couple of years ago when it first came out. And we got really far playing it cooperatively. So what it is, it's a RPG, isometric view, role-playing game. You command multiple characters. You can play multiplayer, in other words, through the story. So other players can jump in and play a character in your party. It's really neat when you do that. It does slow the game down a lot because now everybody's spending all their time going their own way and doing their own thing. But it's very cool. You do need extra computers or workstations to do it, either PCs or Xboxes. But I will say, what's amazing about it, and so that was a problem. We were playing it together, and so one of us could make it or whatever, and so we kind of puttered out on it. My girls went back and played the whole thing through individually, and they're like, Dad, it was amazing. So when COVID hit, I'm like, I've wanted to play this for a while now. It had come out on the Xbox, which is just, I really enjoy playing games on the Xbox because I can lounge on my couch. I have a large TV, blah, 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 headphones. So I did that, and back in March through early summer, I played Divinity 2 Original Sin, and man, was it a good game. I do recommend it solo, managing all your characters yourself. It has a very strong feeling of like a BioWare, Mass Effect or Dragon Age Origins sort of feel, where each of the characters has a personality and a background and a story and specific quests. And so when you have other people playing those characters, you get less information about them. When you're playing everything yourself at your own pace, you really learn a lot about it. It's also an extremely tactical RPG. So it's almost like BioWare game meets XCOM. Very, very good. Highly recommended. If you are a fantasy video game fan at all, you definitely want to check out Divinity 2 Original Sin. Again, it took me about, I want to say about 120 hours or something total, given all the extra side quests, and I did everything I could find. What's amazing about this game is the attention to detail. Everything's voice acted, including down to the animals. So there are spells and abilities that you talk to animals. I highly recommend having at least one character who can do this because there's a lot of cool side quests and stories and interesting things that happen being able to talk to animals. But all the animals are voiced, like every squirrel, every bird. If you have the ability, there's like an actual voice actor doing all that. It's really quite impressive. The voice acting's insane. The story writing's great. There's a lot of plot twists you wouldn't expect. It's not always very clear who the good guys are in any situation or who the bad guys are in any situation. Amazing art style. I love the visual of it. And as I mentioned, what really shines about this game is the combat system. You can really use the terrain and your environments to your advantage. It is actually a little challenging. I mean, it can be, if you just run in and start fighting without any thought to strategy, you will get decimated unless you're on the easiest setting. And even then, you really want to figure things out. But once you get the hang of things, you can do a lot of cool stuff. You can combine spells in interesting ways to create new effects. If you see a barrel, you can shoot it. It'll spread oil everywhere. You can light the barrel on fire. It'll cause environmental damage. You can, blast people off cliffs. All kinds of interesting ways to use the environment, use your tactics, use concealment, use cover. All kinds of interesting, real, very, very tactical. When I compare it to XCOM, I'm not joking. It's very, very, turn-based combat system, which is just phenomenal. So, again, Divinity 2, Original Sin. If you have not played this game yet and you are an RPG fan, you owe it to yourself to give it a look. So that was what I played for the first third of COVID as we go into I guess we're in our 6th month now of this, aren't we? Because in March, April, May, June, July, August. Yeah, well, I guess we're in our 5th month right now, moving into our 6th after we get past August 15th because the lockdown started on March. So yeah, so that's a lot of time to play video games. So the next game I played was Final Fantasy VII, the remake. Now, I didn't have a lot of expectations here. I'd heard rave reviews. I'd heard the graphics were amazing. But what really interested me about it is it wasn't just like Final Fantasy HD, right? It wasn't like the same game from back in the 90s with, 8-bit side-scroller type situation, RPG, where they just made everything look nicer. And actually, it was as if it was like sort of like, what if we took the Final Fantasy story and were to retell it today using all modern video game RPG techniques? So third-person view, switchable characters, action combat with pausing to do things. In fact, the combat system, this isn't a fair comparison because the games don't feel the same at all, but the combat system kind of reminded me of The Witcher in that the combat itself wasn't classic Japanese RPG where you sort of have like all your characters and you pause, each character chooses an action and they're sort of like on different halves of the screen or something. This is very much an action combat game where you're actually dodging, you're trying to strike with your sword and hit them, you're blocking, but then you can sort of semi-pause the game. I say semi-pause because time slows a lot, but it's slowly moving still, and you can then pick to do different abilities, and these abilities could be spells or they could be special moves with your weapon. Like most good RPGs, there are some really four or five, I'm trying to remember the exact number of playable characters now, that join your party. So again, kind of like Dragon Age or Mass Effect, you're going to have a party of characters, very rich in terms of style, art, conversation. Now, unlike Dragon Age and unlike BioWare or Divinity 2, there isn't really a lot of choice in, because in Divinity 2, what's really interesting about it is your choices really matter. So if you let a person live or you kill a person, it really affects the game later in really interesting ways. Final Fantasy, not so much. Final Fantasy is pretty much a really beautifully done, amazing graphics, amazing art, sort of on the rails game. There are some parts of the game where it sort of opens up and there's little mini quests to do around a particular town or area. But there's not that many of them. So you're going to end up doing them all just to get the gear and the level ups. And even if you don't, you're not really missing very much. The majority of the game is straight on, sort of just, walk down a path and get to where you're going sort of thing. It doesn't take away from the storytelling. It's like watching a really great movie. What's interesting about it, and I think, I felt since it was a reboot, and since most of the Final Fantasy games, by the way, aren't connected, right? Like I think most of you probably know this. Most of the Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy III and Final Fantasy VII, have really nothing to do with each other, except there's some crossovers with certain little creatures. Otherwise, they're pretty much independent. So I thought, well, it's a remake, so I don't need to know anything about Final Fantasy VII, the original, to play this and enjoy it. You kind of do. The ending is a little bit convoluted, unless you really know the first game. So I had to go back through, and after it ended, there were a couple things happening that I kind of felt like I should know what was going on, but I didn't. throughout from the very beginning, but I kind of thought it was one of those things where it's like a movie where they give you foreshadowing and then they're going to explain it all at the end, but they really don't. But it turns out with the ending, I then did a bunch of research on the internet after I finished it and read through the plot summaries of the original and what fans of the original thought of the remake. It's a really interesting approach. I don't want to really spoil it, but what was interesting about it was how it is a remake and it's kind of a reboot, but it kind of isn't. Like, it's almost like what they did with the Star Trek movies, where they rebooted the Star Trek movies. The events of the original Star Trek and the original series, right, still happened, but now there's this alternate timeline where the new Star Trek rebooted movies can coexist, and they're not stuck with the character progression that was in the original Star Trek because we're in this alternate timeline now, due to the destruction of Vulcan and all that in Star Trek. So similarly in this, there's this sort of thing that's happening that you slowly start to see, and it's not very much of a spoiler, that fate is different now. So you are playing the same story, but it doesn't have to be the same ending, but it doesn't mean the original didn't occur. So it's really sort of interesting. And once I read that, I thought it was pretty cool. So I almost might recommend, if you're going to try this out, I do recommend trying it if you like sort of the Final Fantasy series, or you like Japanese RPGs and you like that sort of art style and that cool look. It's a lot of fun. There's some really cool mechanics in there. It was just a very fun game with amazing visuals, and I really like the combat system. Very much more arcadey than Divinity, where Divinity was very tactical, turn-based XCOM, and now you've got Final Fantasy, which is not a button masher, but it's pretty close to that, with just crazy over-the-top combat and completely unrealistic. As much as Divinity can be realistic with spells, but completely unrealistic, sort of over-the-top crazy stuff happening. Still, it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. It was nice to get back into sort of that pure Japanese anime RPG sort of realm. It was fun to experience that. So I do recommend Final Fantasy VII. You might want to read a plot summary of the first Final Fantasy VII, though, because it won't spoil the remake. Ironically, it will actually make the remake better for you. So I would do that if it was like one of those YouTube, 2-minute plot summaries of the original, or you want to read a little article on it. I might do that. It is neat. It was a cool way to do it. The other thing that's interesting about it is the ending leaves room for more, which I thought was weird, because like Final Fantasy VIII and 9, they're not connected really. It's just another game by Square Enix in sort of the same universe, but not really. But what's interesting about this is the remake's only, I guess, the first quarter to a third of the original game. So they're set up now to do more Final Fantasy remakes of 7 that continue on that particular story, which can now diverge from the original, if that makes sense. So that's interesting, right? So I think that's going to be cool. And I'm definitely down for when those come out. I'll definitely give them a check out because, again, I really did enjoy it. It was a lot of fun. All right. And that leads me to my latest game that I'm playing, which is, I'm sure I'm pronouncing this last word wrong. Ghost of Tsushima. No, that's not right. Sashimi. I'm not pronouncing it right. It's very hard to pronounce for me. But it's really cool. It is a PS4. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you the platforms. So for Divinity 2 Original Sin, that's pretty much on every single platform right now. PC, PlayStation, Xbox, including the Switch. Just came out for the Switch not too long ago. So there's really no excuse for not giving that one a go. Final Fantasy VII, PS4 exclusive. And now Ghost of Tsushima, also PS4 exclusive. I'm just going to start calling it Ghost, or as my youngest daughter and I call it, the Samurai Game, because it's great. So, because it is great, and I can't pronounce the name. So my apologies. I'll also say, based on my kids' enjoyment, and again, my daughters now are age, can you believe it, 18 and 16. What is going on with time? But anyway, so my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter both love Divinity 2, both played it through the end 1.5 times each, and they considered playing it through again. So they really liked that one. I was the only one that played Final Fantasy. It was a little too weird for them. My youngest daughter, my 16-year-old, is loving Ghost, or as we call it, the Samurai Game. She's loving every minute of it. So this game is right in a genre that I've really grown to love over the years. I would describe it as the game it's going to remind you of the most when you jump right in. And I don't think it's fair to say these things because it does remind you of it, but it doesn't, is Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption. And I actually feel it's closer to Red Dead Redemption than Assassin's Creed. All what these games have in common, they're all open world exploration games, right? single hero. And you can pretty much do everything you can dream about, right? So you can climb that mountain, you can ride that horse, you can drive that buggy, pretty much do anything you can dream up. These games all have that sort of open world feeling of a living, breathing world, right? And Ghost of Tsushima, I think it's Tsushima, I think that's what it is. I always get a little fuzzy if you pronounce the T or not, but I think it's Tsushima. So Ghost of Tsushima has that feeling, right? And what's really cool about it, what drew me in, was very much in the way that Assassin's Creed Origin and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they made you feel like you were living in the world of ancient Egypt or ancient Greece, right? And really understanding those cultures and how those people were, as far as we understand, right? And similarly, Red Dead Redemption gave you that feeling with the Old West as well, but then also it layered on an even stronger storytelling system. I would say that I love, by the way, I played through Odyssey as well as Origins, Assassin's Creed, and then I've also played through Red Dead Redemption. I thought Red Dead Redemption storytelling and character development was super good. I thought Odyssey and Origins was good, but not quite as good as Red Dead Redemption. And I would say that Ghost of Tsushima is somewhere in the middle. I would say it's stronger than the Assassin's Creed games in terms of storytelling, not quite as rich in terms of the character development yet. I'm still working on it, but the world, I think the way they capture the world in Ghost of Tsushima is, quite frankly, mind-blowing. Like, you really feel like a couple things in here really are great. First of all, it's just a beautiful game. Gorgeous game, and the art direction's amazing. And one of the things they really wanted to have very minimalistic HUD. So there's very little information on the screen. And one of their most innovative things they did was, in Japanese culture, it's a very nature-oriented culture. So nature's a big part of the game. But what's really interesting about it is, like, if you're trying to figure out where you want to go, like have a waypoint, there's no like little arrow or icon or anything on the map or compass or anything to show you where to go. Instead, the wind always blows in the direction of your current destination, right? So if it's an objective, or maybe you picked a waypoint on the map, or you're trying to get to a town or whatever. And it's really cool how they do it. And it takes a couple minutes to get the hang of it, but there's like sort of like subtle visuals to the wind, like the curly cues you normally see in art of the wind blowing, but then also you'll see the leaves moving. And you can always swipe up on the touchpad to get the wind to blow vigorously for a moment to kind of really give you a good visual. But even if you don't do that over time, you start to notice the small clues, like that the blades of grass drifting away, or the leaves on the wind drifting away, or the way the fireflies are blowing. It's just really cool, and it almost gets you to be more in tune with the game's nature, if you will, as you do it, which just feels more Japanese, if for lack of a better term. I really like that mechanic. Is such a great idea. And then similarly, when you're near something of really interest, but it's sort of a side quest, because you're going on these worlds, you're going through this, amazing island in Japan, and basically the premise is you're a samurai, okay, and you are your island's been invaded by the Mongols, and right from the very beginning, you're basically one of the last remaining samurai from the initial invasion attack. And you're on your own trying to, fight back against the Mongols and figure out how you're going to do this and get through this, right? What's interesting about it is a bunch of things. First of all, just the art direction. Again, as I was saying, the wind's really cool, but the other thing they do really neat is these little yellow birds that you'll just see occasionally, and they'll start flying in a direction. If you follow them, they will lead you to something cool, like maybe it's a little loot box hiding in the corner or something interesting, right? So they'll take you to sort of notable destinations that maybe you could have found if you kept walking on your own, but it's just kind of a neat little thing, again, to make you closer to nature. You can ignore all this, but it's just so cool. Little things you can do in addition to combat, like there's like little places where you can go and write your haiku, and this will unlock new kinds of sort of vanity gear. The haiku writing system is so, as my daughter would say, chill. It's really nice. Which is weird, right? But again, as longtime listeners know, we like haikus in the D6 generation, so having a game mechanic with haikus built into it is a win. So I really like the haiku mechanic. I like a lot about it. I mean, there's really a lot going on here. But basically, it's one of those, you got this giant map, you explore the map, you find little side quests. There's obviously main quests you can go do. The combat system and the moral dilemma system is really interesting in this one. So, there's the big bad guys, the Mongols, who are everywhere, and they're definitely portrayed as sort of clear villains who are basically pillaging and killing everyone without you either join them or you die is basically the Mongol way, as it presented in this game. Meanwhile, the samurai, are the, in Western terms, the knights, right? They're the good, they're the noble, justice, fight with valor and honor. And the interesting sort of moral dilemma you have in this game is there's multiple ways you can fight, kind of like Assassin's Creed. You can go at it straight on, or you can try to be stealth. And there's lots of cool stealth stuff that starts to remind you more and more of being a ninja. You got these little throwing shurikens. You've got, of course, smoke bombs. You've got sticky bombs you can throw on people and things because the Mongols are coming with black powder and your guy starts to learn how to use their weapons against them, kind of thing, which is interesting. But also, you can fight with honor. So when you walk up on a group of Mongols, you can either choose to, hide in the grass, sneak up on them, assassinate a few with your shorter sword, and then get in there and be sort of like very Assassin's Creedy. But you have to level up to do this well. It's not like Assassin's Creed right from the beginning. You're really good at assassinating people. Early on, you're not very good at it because that's not how you're trained as a samurai. And so it takes you a long time to kill a guy, sneaking kind of thing, as opposed to a straight up fight. But you can also, when you see those guys standing there, you can push up on the D-pad and it challenges them. It's send your best warrior. And you stand there and there's like a timing thing. It's almost like drawing guns in Red Dead. There's like a timing thing where you can basically insta-kill the guy and then get into the fight, which gives you a bunch of honor. There are basically, or I think it's Resolve, it's actually called. There are actually two resources you're going to be watching in the game, your health and then your Resolve. Your Resolve, you gain it by doing something honorable or noble. And during combat, maybe it's just parrying, maybe it's killing a guy. Sometimes when you beat a guy, he'll fall to the ground, but he'll still be like sort of crawling around in pain, and you can end his suffering with honor, which basically gives you more Resolve. Things like that. So your Resolve, you're going to spend to either heal in combat or do power moves in combat. What's really great about the game, the combat system, it is an action-based sort of Assassin's Creed style speed, a live action, not turn-based combat system. But you actually, as you progress through the game, you'll unlock different fighting stances, which is really cool. You can shift your stance in mid-combat, and different stances are effective against different types of warriors. So one of the stances is really good against other swordsmen. Another stance is good against people with shields. If you don't have that stance, you can still beat them. It's just much, much harder when you're fighting a shield guy. But once you've unlocked that, you can really take on shield guys with just as much ease as sword guys. Then you'll unlock a stance later that's really good against spearmen, for example. Initially, there's some moves the enemies can do against you that you can't really parry. It's got to dodge out of the way. Eventually, you'll learn how to parry these moves, things like that. But these fighting styles and the way they fight, it does not take many sword hits to die or kill another, which feels right with the super sharp samurai katana weapons. So it really captures the combat style of, as I imagine, my limited understanding of the samurai culture. It really feels right. But what's interesting is you can also do these assassin moves and be very unsamurai-like. And so the morals of the game, right from the very beginning, the game makes it very clear the way samurai is taught. You must look into the eyes of your enemy when you kill them. So this, because the samurai were created, according to the game, as a response to just barbarism and thievery. And so the samurai sort of had this code of honor, and they enforce the code of honor. So they always fight with honor. The moral dilemma you get into is, now, most of the samurai have been wiped out. You're one of the few left. There's these Mongols everywhere, and you're vastly outnumbered. Of course, you want to fight with honor, but you probably can't win that way. And so you sort of have to start learning to fight dirty, as it were. And so your character starts to have these sort of moral dilemmas, and you can choose as the player how much you fight dirty, or can you totally pull this whole game off fighting only with honor, or somewhere in the middle. I'm not far enough along yet. This is the one I'm still in the middle of. I'm not far enough along yet to know if there's any sort of permanent story sort of twists based on how much you do or don't fight with honor. It seems like so far where I am, the ends kind of justify the means, although you do, as you level up and gain more skills, you're going to choose to apply them into more of the honorable kinds of combat. They call it either, there's a samurai sort of talent tree, and then there's a ghost talent tree. And the ghost talent tree is basically all the sort of ninja-y type things, the sort of stealth type moves. And the samurai ones are the more things you would expect a samurai to be doing. And so you can kind of decide where you're going to put those points. So you can kind of build a more stealthy or more straight up combat character. There's also archery is a big part of the game. There's several different bows you can collect. and you want to get really good with those bows. They're very, very effective. I'm not really sure where bows fall on the scale of honor, so I don't know. I'm not sure how guilty I should feel when I'm sniping a guy in the head with a bow without him knowing I'm there. I feel like that's probably not the samurai way. Maybe if he sees me and he's shooting arrows at me and then I shoot him in the head, maybe that's okay. So anyway, I got to say, Ghost of Tsushima, amazing. I'm only about, I want to say I'm a third of the way through. I'm still in Act 1. Maybe not even a third. I'm very much enjoying every little nook and cranny of this game. I just love the visuals. I love it's got that Assassin's Creed thing where you can clear forts and take over areas that are controlled by the Mongols and free the people kind of thing. So you got that going on. It's just wonderful. You really feel like you're in that world of the samurai, which I'm loving. And you can tell the attention to detail, the craftsmanship, the love for this culture that was put into this game is top notch. So that's probably the most different game that's the same, because it's in the end of the day, people would be not wrong to say it's just an open world game where you run around and collect stuff and unlock things and fight people. Yes, I mean yes, but it doesn't feel like that. It's like that's like saying every painting's a painting. Is oil on canvas. Yes, every painting's oil on canvas, but different artists can do different things with it. And I would say what's happened with Ghost of Tsushima is people who have a love for open world and exploring games like Assassin's Creed and like Red Dead Redemption and like GTA have lovingly created this world in Japan around Japanese and samurai culture that is, quite frankly, amazing. So that would be, if you're going to start with any one of these, I would start with that. It's going to be really the game that's going to, I think, going to impress you the most. So again, unfortunately, it's a PS4 exclusive, so you're going to have a PlayStation to take advantage of it. My understanding of it is going to be on the 5 as well. I don't know that there'll be any better graphics or experiences on the 5. But in any case, Ghost of Tsushima is the most unique game of the games I've played. I would say Final Fantasy V, if you're looking for a nice Japanese anime sort of romp, and Divinity 2 Original Sin, if you are an RPG fan and your D&D group can't get together and you wish you could feel like you're playing D&D by yourself, that's really pretty much as close as it gets. And for those who don't know, the studio who did Divinity 2 has been tasked with building Baldur's Gate 3, the new video game. And so that's super exciting. And if you want to get a taste for how that's going to feel when it's Baldur's Gate, definitely play Divinity 2. Because it's basically, they're going to take that engine and they're going to kick it up a notch and make it all D&D based. But in any case, check those out as well. Again, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII The Remake, and Divinity 2 Original Sin. And I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening. Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@the d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.